Okay, let's unpack this. Have you ever felt like you're just drowning in a sea of information? Especially when it comes to something as fast-moving, as complex, and frankly, as bewildering as Bitcoin.
Oh, absolutely. It's constant noise.
Right. One day it's heralded as the future of finance, the next it's crashing, and everyone, absolutely everyone, seems to have a radically different opinion on what it actually is or what it's for.
Yeah, the narrative shifts so quickly.
For so many of us, Bitcoin, even after more than a decade since its inception, still feels like it operates on a very distinct two-lane highway. One lane, well, that's the shadowy one, often associated with scams and illicit activities.
The fear factor lane.
Exactly. The other, that's the high-octane track purely for speculation, where fortunes are made and lost in the blink of an eye,
The casino lane, you could say.
pretty much. So today, in this deep dive, we're taking a critical look at that very framework. We're drawing our insights from a fascinating report titled An Examination of Bitcoin's Economic Roles, a dichotomy of illicit finance and speculation, alongside other rigorous analyses.
Good stuff. Important to look at the beta.
Our mission is clear: to evaluate whether this stark two-lane thesis truly holds up under scrutiny. And, perhaps more importantly, to explore if there's any other lane, a genuine third path, emerging from the depths of its complex ecosystem.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Or maybe the billion-dollar question now.
Maybe. Look, we're not here to endorse, and we're certainly not here to condemn. We're here to cut through the hype, to give you an honest, evidence-based understanding of where Bitcoin truly stands right now.
What's truly fascinating when you study the evolution of new technologies, especially in the financial realm, is how incredibly quickly dominant narratives form around them. It's almost like the sheer promise of something entirely new, something revolutionary.
Yeah.
It creates a fertile ground for a particular kind of deception to flourish from the very outset. We see a consistent pattern, the conflation of a nascent, often quite technical and niche institutional project with sweeping populist promises of a financial revolution.
Interesting. So the hype gets ahead of the reality.
Way ahead, and often deliberately steered that way. So as we navigate what our sources reveal about these various lanes, I'd really encourage you, our listener, to consider your own initial perceptions of Bitcoin. Have you been swayed by one narrative over another?
Good point. Let's see if the evidence aligns with those perceptions,
Yeah.
or perhaps, subtly shifts them.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's kick things off then with what is, for many people, the most worrying and, frankly, undeniable aspect of the cryptocurrency world.
Okay.
It's the lane that many people fear, and what our sources confirm is a very real, very active thoroughfare: illicit finance and systemic fraud.
Right. The dark side.
It's tempting to dismiss these as isolated incidents, just a few bad actors popping up now and then.
Yeah.
But our sources are emphatic that it's not merely a fringe problem.
No, it's structural.
Instead, they suggest it's a deeply structural issue, rooted in some of Bitcoin's core characteristics. So I have to ask, if Bitcoin is supposed to be this groundbreaking technology, why does it seem to be inherently such fertile ground for fraud?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Isn't that a fundamental contradiction to its promise of transparency and decentralization? What makes this specific digital frontier such incredibly fertile ground for nefarious activities?
That's a crucial point, and it's precisely what our sources drill down on. They reveal a uniquely fertile environment that crypto, in its current stage, provides for scammers. It's almost a perfect storm of factors.
Like what?
Well, our research details a highly sophisticated tactical toolkit employed by these fraudsters, which has evolved right alongside the technology itself. For instance, a foundational method involves creating highly deceptive fake websites,
Right, phishing sites, basically.
but often way more sophisticated than typical phishing. These aren't just shoddy imitations. They meticulously mimic legitimate cryptocurrency trading platforms, official crypto wallets, or even government agencies that might regulate crypto.
Wow. So very convincing.
Astonishingly convincing sometimes, designed to fool even a slightly careful eye. And it doesn't stop at websites.
Yeah.
These sophisticated scams are often paired with fake mobile applications, deceptively distributed even through official app stores like Google Play and the Apple App Store.
Wait, even the official stores, how did they get through?
Well, they exploit loopholes, use deceptive descriptions, maybe function normally for a bit before activating the malicious part. While these apps are eventually removed, once reported and investigated, they can still defraud thousands of users, siphoning off millions before they're finally taken down.
That's scary.
And the speed with which new ones appear is frankly alarming. They just keep popping up.
So it's a constant battle.
Exactly. Now, what's truly crucial to the success of these schemes is their parasitic leveraging of Bitcoin's well-established brand and its complex technical lexicon.
Meaning they use the name Bitcoin to sound legit.
Precisely. Scams frequently invoke Bitcoin's name or borrow its terminology words like blockchain, smart contract, mining to create a superficial veneer of legitimacy.
Jargon is camouflage.
Absolutely. This is particularly effective for individuals who have heard of Bitcoin's astronomical price rises and success stories, but might lack the deeper technical knowledge to differentiate a genuine blockchain-backed project from a complete fabrication.
Like with OneCoin.
Exactly like OneCoin. Its marketers explicitly claimed it worked just like any other cryptocurrency. A simple but incredibly powerful deception for those new to the space, especially when combined with promises of easy wealth.
Got it. So the tech mimicry is step one.
Step one. And this technical mimicry leads us directly to the profound psychological dimension of crypto fraud, which our sources suggest is arguably even more insidious than the technical side.
How so?
Scammers are masterful manipulators of human emotions and cognitive biases. They directly appeal to raw greed by promising guaranteed, often truly unrealistic returns. We're talking get-rich-quick schemes on hyperdrive.
The oldest trick in the book.
But amplified by crypto's volatility narrative. Then they weaponize the fear of missing out, or FOMO, by creating an artificial sense of urgency around their supposed opportunities, pressuring victims to invest immediately before the opportunity vanishes.
Classic high-pressure sales tactics.
Totally. And they skillfully exploit genuine technological confusion, cloaking their schemes in a fog of complex, often meaningless jargon. People feel intimidated, maybe embarrassed to admit they don't understand, and trust the expert.
So it's a combination. Tech confusion, greed, FOMO.
This combination, sophisticated technical mimicry merged with expertly crafted psychological manipulation, transforms the crypto ecosystem into a veritable breeding ground for fraud. The result is a direct and often irreversible transfer of wealth from hopeful, sometimes naive participants to highly sophisticated orchestrators, leaving behind a trail of devastated lives.
That's a sobering thought. And it really drives home that this isn't just a handful of one-off incidents. To truly understand the pervasive nature of this scam lane, our sources don't just talk theory. They spotlight some landmark cases showing how these schemes have evolved.
The blueprints.
But still rely on classic blueprints. They might vary in their specific narratives, but they generally follow a common pattern, leveraging the hype around cryptocurrency to power a classic Ponzi or pyramid structure. Let's dive into some of the most infamous ones. First up, OneCoin.
Ah, yes, the crypto queen.
OneCoin stands as a chilling example, truly one of history's most audacious Ponzi schemes. It managed to pull in an estimated $4 billion from investors globally, a truly staggering sum that speaks to the power of its deceptive narrative.
$4 billion. Just incredible.
Founded by Ruja Ignatova, a charismatic figure who famously dubbed herself the Crypto Queen, OneCoin was aggressively marketed as a revolutionary cryptocurrency, explicitly positioned as being set to eclipse Bitcoin.
The classic Bitcoin killer narrative.
Exactly. But here's the absolute kicker, the fundamental, unconscionable lie. It lacked the most basic foundational component of a true cryptocurrency.
Which was?
It had no blockchain. Zero. All transactions and coin balances were maintained on a centralized SQL database, completely controlled by the company.
So it wasn't crypto at all, just smoke and mirrors.
Nothing more than fabricated numbers in a spreadsheet conjured out of thin air, those OneCoins people thought they were buying. Worthless.
Wow.
The scheme eventually collapsed under the weight of escalating global regulatory investigations and mounting victim complaints. Ignatova herself disappeared in 2017 after a U.S. warrant was issued for her arrest.
You'll miss him, right?
Still one of the FBI's most wanted fugitives. And her co-founder, Sebastian Greenwood, was later sentenced to 20 years in prison for his pivotal role. It was a stark reminder of how easily the allure of crypto buzzwords can mask old-fashioned fraud.
And then building on that, you have Bitconnect, which represents a disturbing evolution. It shows a step up in, let's say, technological sophistication, or at least the appearance of it.
Okay, how is it different?
On the surface, it involved what appeared to be a real tradable token called BCC, You could actually buy and sell it on exchanges for a while.
So it seemed more legitimate.
Exactly. However, at its core, our sources confirm it was a textbook Ponzi scheme that ultimately defrauded investors of over $2 billion.
$2 billion, another huge one. What was the hook?
The scheme's central promise revolved around a lending program that guaranteed seemingly impossible returns of up to 40% per month.
40% a month. That screams Ponzi.
Absolutely. These astronomical returns were supposedly generated by a proprietary trading bot. The inconvenient truth, as investigators later confirmed, was that no such bot existed.
Of course not.
The entire scheme unraveled dramatically in early 2018 after receiving cease and desist orders from various regulators, including those in Texas and North Carolina. This regulatory scrutiny and the accompanying legal actions led directly to the price of the BCC token crashing.
How bad was the crash?
Over 92% in a very short period. Just wiped out. It wiped out the investments of countless individuals and cementing its place as one of the largest crypto frauds of its time. It showcased how even a genuine token could be co-opted to front a classic Ponzi.
So a slightly more advanced facade, same underlying fraud. And then we have SafeMoon. That sounds more recent.
Much more recent, launched in 2021. And SafeMoon really demonstrates the co-evolution of fraud alongside the rapid advancements in cryptocurrency technology itself.
Okay, co-evolution. How?
SafeMoon adopted the language and mechanisms of decentralized finance, or DeFi, which to the uninitiated can sound incredibly complex and secure. Things like liquidity pools, tokenomics.
Right, all the new buzzwords.
Exactly. The developers promoted SafeMoon with a narrative centered on supposed locked liquidity pools. They claimed these pools were rug-proof, meaning that the developers supposedly couldn't pull the rug out from under investors and vanish with their funds.
Which is a common fear in DeFi.
A huge fear. They claimed these pools were completely inaccessible to them, promising ultimate safety for investors. But this promise of security, our sources confirm, was a deliberate and calculated lie.
Oh.
Federal prosecutors proved that the CEO, Caroni, and his co-conspirators retained access to these very same liquidity pools they claimed were locked.
So they lied about the locks.
Completely. They then used this access to misappropriate millions of dollars worth of assets, specifically over $9 million acquired by Caroni alone for their personal enrichment.
Just straight up theft hidden behind DeFi jargon.
Precisely. So if you look at the progression, OneCoin was a low-tech MLM multi-level marketing just dressed up with crypto buzzwords. Bitconnect advanced that model with a real token but a simple Ponzi promise. SafeMoon represents the next generation, using the complex, seemingly sophisticated architecture of DeFi as a deceptive facade for old-fashioned theft.
It's a chilling reminder that the wolf in sheep's clothing is simply adapting its disguise, keeping up with the tech.
It really is. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the insights from Table 1 in our sources succinctly summarize the common threads across these high-profile frauds and so many others.
What are those common threads?
They highlight the persistent core mechanisms from multi-level marketing and Ponzi structures to the deceptive use of smart contracts. They detail the primary lures, which almost invariably involve promises of unrealistic returns or groundbreaking revolutionary technology.
Greed and hype.
Greed and hype. And tragically, they document the staggering estimated losses incurred by victims globally, alongside the eventual legal outcomes, which often include founders being fugitives or jailed. These aren't just isolated incidents, a few bad apples in a vast orchard.
No, it sounds systemic.
They show a clear, persistent, and worryingly sophisticated pattern of exploitation deeply embedded within the crypto ecosystem, evolving in its methods, but always preying on the same fundamental human vulnerabilities. It's a systemic problem, not a series of exceptions.
Okay, that's sobering. Now, you mentioned DeFi with SafeMoon. DeFi, decentralized finance.
Mm-hmm.
That's often presented as something different, right? Maybe even that legitimate third lane.
It absolutely is. The promise is incredibly appealing: to remove intermediaries, offer unprecedented transparency through code, and unlock entirely new financial possibilities without the need for traditional banks or brokers. It sounds revolutionary.
It does, but what's the reality?
Well, the empirical reality of DeFi, as our sources painstakingly point out, frequently sees it collapse not into a promised utopia, but back into the scam lane, or at least a lane of catastrophic failure. Rather than eliminating risk, DeFi often reconfigures it in novel, far more technically complex ways, creating a profound paradox where financial innovation, ironically, becomes a primary vector for systemic exploitation.
So the innovation itself creates new risks.
Precisely. The DeFi landscape, for example, is littered with the carcasses of projects that have suffered catastrophic exploits. These aren't just the result of simple low-tech human fraud like a Ponzi scheme. We're talking about incredibly sophisticated attacks on the underlying code and infrastructure.
Like hacks.
Exactly. Consider the staggering $615.5 million hack of the Ronin network,
Wow, over $500 million.
or the $326 million exploit of the Wormhole Bridge. These weren't unsophisticated Ponzi schemes like OneCoin. These were technical attacks targeting the very heart of these platforms.
What kind of attacks?
The attack vectors are highly specialized, ranging from complex flash loan attacks where attackers borrow huge sums, manipulate prices, and repay the loan all in one transaction to access control breaches and intricate smart contract flaws, sometimes exploited by a single, tiny error in the code.
A single coding error can lead to hundreds of millions lost.
Potentially, yes. And often irreversibly because of the nature of blockchain. This raises an important question that our sources pose. If immutability and the complexity of code are touted as the ultimate strengths of blockchain technology, why do they so often lead to such massive, irreversible losses?
Yeah, that seems like a fundamental problem.
It highlights a critical vulnerability.
Yeah.
Innovation without sufficient safeguards, rigorous auditing, and a deep understanding of its novel risks can amplify rather than diminish the potential for catastrophic financial loss. It's a wild west where the sheriffs are still learning the ropes and the outlaws are often way ahead.
Okay, so that's the scam lane. A deeply entrenched and structural part of the ecosystem, continually evolving, and even bleeding into areas like DeFi that promise innovation. But our sources suggest there's another dominant thoroughfare.
The bigger one, maybe?
Perhaps even wider and certainly more publicly discussed. If the scam lane felt like a labyrinth of traps and illusions, buckle up. Our sources reveal an even more sprawling landscape, the speculation casino.
Right. Where the house doesn't always win, but the volatility is always high.
Exactly. Here, fortunes aren't just stolen. They're won and lost on the spin of a narrative roulette wheel. It's where the promise of astronomical returns takes center stage. What, in your view, makes something truly speculative in the first place? And how does Bitcoin fit that definition so perfectly?
At its core, Bitcoin's identity as a speculative instrument is rooted in its fundamental financial profile. Unlike traditional assets such as stocks, which represent ownership in a company that generates earnings, or bonds, which pay interest.
Things that produce value.
Exactly. Bitcoin is what we call a non-productive asset. This means it generates no cash flow, it offers no yield, and it doesn't represent a claim on any underlying productive enterprise.
So it doesn't do anything, economically speaking.
Intrinsically, no. Think about it. A share of Apple stock means you own a piece of a company that makes iPhones and sells services, generating revenue. Bitcoin doesn't do that. Its value, therefore, is derived entirely from what another participant, a later buyer, is willing to pay for it in the future.
Okay, so pure supply and demand based on belief.
Essentially, yes. This makes it a quintessential example of what's often referred to as the greater fool theory. You're buying it in the hope that someone else, a greater fool, will come along later and pay even more for it than you did.
It's the ultimate pass the hot potato game.
Only the potato is digital and can explode or deflate massively at any moment. This inherent lack of an intrinsic value anchor is the primary driver of its most defining characteristic: extreme volatility.
Right, the crazy price swings.
Bitcoin's price history is, to put it mildly, a chronicle of violent, breathtaking swings. Our sources, pulling from rigorous analysis, including data from NYU's VLab, reveal something astounding. Bitcoin's average annualized volatility hovers around 80%.
80%. That's insane compared to, say, the stock market.
It absolutely dwarfs it. Traditional asset classes might hover in the single or low double digits, even during market crises. This isn't just a bump in the road, it's a roller coaster designed for thrill seekers, offering the potential for rapid, outsized gains.
Which is the lure, right? The jackpot potential.
Exactly. That attracts a particular type of participant. Those with an exceptionally high-risk tolerance who are chasing those quick, dramatic returns. It's the thrill of the potential win that keeps the casino floor busy.
But it's not just about the cold, hard numbers or abstract financial profiles. It's about people and their emotions, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. The mechanics of the Bitcoin market cannot be fully understood through the lens of purely rational finance. Its wild, often inexplicable price swings are clearly fueled by powerful and often irrational psychological forces.
Like what?
At the heart of this landscape, as our sources highlight, are the twin forces of greed, the insatiable desire for quick wealth and fear of missing out, or FOMO. Research has explicitly identified these as primary drivers of irrational buying decisions in the crypto space, leading people to jump in at the peak of a rally.
Buying high out of fear of missing even higher prices.
Precisely. And empirical studies have also found that the high risk, high reward, always on nature of cryptocurrency trading can very quickly lead to what are described as addiction like behaviors.
Like constantly checking the price.
Exactly. A compulsive need to check prices and make trades. This is further exacerbated by common psychological traps that our brains fall into. Think about it. Overconfidence, where traders believe they know more than they do and can time the market perfectly.
I've got this figured out.
Right. Then there's confirmation bias, where they selectively seek out information that only confirms their existing beliefs, ignoring any contrary evidence.
Only reading the good news.
You got it. And what's known as the disposition effect, that frustrating tendency to bail out of your winning assets too soon, locking in small gains while stubbornly clinging to your losing assets for too long, hoping they'll miraculously recover.
It'll come back. Yeah, I could see that.
This individual psychology is then magnified dramatically by herding behavior, where social media platforms like X, formerly Twitter, Reddit, and various Telegram groups, play an outsized role in shaping market sentiment and encouraging traders to pile into assets en masse almost simultaneously.
So everyone jumps on the bandwagon.
It's like a digital stampede, fueled by collective excitement and fear, often with very little underlying rationale, where everyone charges in the same direction, sometimes right off a cliff.
Wow. So psychology is a massive driver here.
Huge. And in a market largely devoid of fundamental value, as we've established Bitcoin to be, narratives become the absolute fuel that powers the speculative engine.
Narratives. You mean the stories people tell about Bitcoin?
Exactly. Bitcoin's history is, in many ways, a history of evolving stories, each meticulously crafted and widely propagated to justify future price appreciation and to attract a new cohort of buyers into the market. When there's no intrinsic value, the story becomes the value.
Can you give an example?
The most prominent example of this narrative shift is the journey from digital cash to digital gold. Ah, right, I've heard both.
The original vision for Bitcoin, as laid out in Satoshi Nakamoto's white paper, was for it to be a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, a truly decentralized replacement for everyday currency.
Buying coffee with Bitcoin?
That was the dream. However, as our sources explained, this vision largely became untenable in practice. Technical limitations, such as prohibitively slow transaction speeds, sometimes taking minutes or even hours to confirm, and high, unpredictable fees, made it entirely impractical for daily purchases.
So the digital cash idea didn't really work out.
Not on the main layer, no. So the story pivoted. The very volatility that made it a poor currency was ingeniously reframed, not as a bug, but as a desirable feature proof of its scarcity and its decentralized, censorship-resistant nature.
Turning a negative into a positive.
Clever marketing, essentially. Suddenly, the new narrative of Bitcoin as digital gold, a scarce, global, censorship-resistant store of value, akin to physical gold, took hold and gained immense traction, amplified by influencers, crypto conferences, and dedicated media outlets. But is it actually a good store of value? Like gold?
Well, this store of value thesis is itself highly contested, and for good reason. Critics, as meticulously cited in our sources, rightly argue that an asset that can routinely lose 80% of its value in a single year, or even within a few months,
Doesn't sound very storing value.
it's simply not a reliable store of value for most practical purposes, especially for individuals trying to preserve their wealth. Even institutional proponents like Fidelity Digital Assets concede that Bitcoin is at best an aspirational store of value.
Aspirational. That's telling.
It implicitly acknowledges that it doesn't yet truly fulfill this role in practice. This constant shifting of narratives from one grand promise to another, whether it's digital cash yesterday, digital gold today, or something else tomorrow, is the key mechanism for sustaining the speculative game.
Keep the story fresh, keep the buyers coming.
Precisely. The product being sold in this casino is not genuine utility. It is, quite simply, the hope of future price increases, expertly repackaged in a new story for each market cycle, keeping the speculative engine churning. It's a compelling illusion.
Within the dedicated Bitcoin community, there's a widely popularized strategy known as hodling.
Ah, HODL, hold on for dear life.
Right, it's deliberately misspelled, a relic of an early typo in an online forum, but it essentially means holding the asset long-term, regardless of price volatility or market downturns. This is often presented as a disciplined, almost spiritual investment philosophy.
Diamond hands.
Exactly, a testament to true belief in Bitcoin's inevitable future dominance. However, a critical examination, as our sources meticulously provide, suggests it functions more as a psychological coping mechanism for what is, in essence, a long-term gamble.
A way to deal with the stress of the volatility.
Perhaps. The core of the HODL ideology rests on what can be described as an unfalsifiable thesis. When the price of Bitcoin rises dramatically, it's immediately declared as vindication of their belief, proof that they were right all along and that their diamond hands prevailed.
See? I told you.
Right. But when the price crashes, which it often does with significant drops, sometimes 50% or even 80% in a bear market, it's conveniently dismissed as merely a healthy shakeout, a cleansing of weak hands, or an opportune moment to buy the dip.
Heads I win, tails you lose. Or rather, tails, it's just a temporary setback.
Exactly. This creates a belief system that is effectively immune to any negative evidence. A Ocho dealer, by definition, has no fundamental anchor for their investment beyond this belief. They're making a long-duration bet purely on future market sentiment,
Hoping more people buy in later.
hoping that eventually more and more people will buy into the narrative and drive the price ever higher, regardless of any real-world utility or cash flow. It's a faith-based investment strategy.
It certainly sounds like it.
What's particularly noteworthy, and perhaps even concerning, is the recent institutional normalization of this speculation, particularly through the introduction of spot Bitcoin ETFs, exchange-traded funds, in major financial markets.
Ah, the ETFs. That was a big deal.
Huge news. On the surface, it feels like this is bringing Bitcoin into the mainstream, legitimizing it.
What was the narrative? Yeah, Wall Street is here.
But our sources suggest something far more nuanced. This development, they emphasize, does not fundamentally change the speculative character of Bitcoin itself.
That doesn't make it productive.
Exactly. Instead, it adds a layer of professional gloss to what is still very much a casino. It integrates the speculative game more deeply into the mainstream financial system, making it far easier for retail participants, that's you and me, to place their bets.
Easier access to the casino tables.
Often without fully understanding the underlying mechanics or the profound risks involved. This development does not legitimize Bitcoin's utility. Rather, it legitimizes speculation on Bitcoin as an asset class.
That's a really important distinction.
It is. So what does this all mean for you, the learner, who just wants to understand if Bitcoin has a genuine, tangible purpose beyond being a pure betting chip in a massive digital casino? Is there anything else truly emerging?
The search for the third lane?
Precisely. We've explored the dominant realities of the scam lane and the speculation casino. They are clearly the main highways. Now, let's turn our attention to what many hope is the elusive third lane. Does it actually exist?
And if it does, what is it really?
And if so, what does it truly look like, if anything, beyond the hype? Our sources systematically evaluate some of the most prominent narratives for Bitcoin's real-world utility, rigorously checking them against empirical data and observed outcomes. Let's see what they found when they look beyond the grand promises.
Okay, so the original vision for Bitcoin, as we touched on earlier, was laid out in its white paper as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system, essentially, a new form of digital money for everyday transactions bypassing traditional banks.
The payments use case.
Right. Our sources highlight that despite over a decade of intense advocacy, billions of dollars invested, and continuous technological development, this vision has largely failed to materialize in any meaningful way for the average user.
Really? Still?
Empirical evidence clearly shows negligible direct merchant adoption globally. When transactions do occur with cryptocurrencies, data from payment processors indicates that other, often newer cryptocurrencies are frequently preferred over Bitcoin.
Why?
Primarily due to Bitcoin's notoriously high fees and painfully slow confirmation times for on-chain transactions. Nobody wants to wait 30 minutes and pay $10 to buy a coffee.
Makes sense. Impractical. But what about the Lightning Network? Isn't that supposed to fix this?
Ah, yes. The primary counterargument to this failure, and one you hear often, is the Lightning Network, LN. This is a Layer 2 protocol designed to sit on top of Bitcoin.
Sort of express lane.
Kind of, yeah. Promising ultra-fast, low-cost transactions that could finally make it suitable for everyday payments. And our sources acknowledge that LN has indeed shown significant growth in usage and reliability.
So it is working.
It's working better, particularly for small payments where success rates have improved dramatically to 75–95%. But its absolute scale remains trivial in the context of global payments.
Trivial how?
For instance, while public transaction volume on LN saw strong growth, up 266% year over year by August 2023, this was from an extremely low base. Still a drop in the ocean compared to Visa or MasterCard.
Okay, so growing but still small.
Right. Furthermore, network capacity and node count have even seen consolidation towards professional institutional nodes, suggesting centralization, which kind of goes against the original ethos.
Interesting. Less decentralized than hoped.
And the most revealing insight here, according to our sources, is that the Lightning Network's most viable implementations are emerging not as a consumer payment system,
But as what?
but as B2B settlement infrastructure.
Business to business.
Yes, where the end user or everyday consumer never touches Bitcoin directly. This is a potentially valuable function, for sure, a way for businesses to settle transactions more efficiently behind the scenes.
But it's not the original dream.
It's a far cry from the original dream of Bitcoin as an everyday currency for the masses. Imagine trying to buy coffee with Bitcoin, only to find the system's actually optimized for multinational corporate settlements. That's the surprising twist here.
That's a crucial distinction. Okay, so the payments use case is, let's say, evolving differently than planned. What about the other big narrative? The one about helping people in unstable economies, remittances.
Right. Another incredibly persistent narrative, one that often tugs at the heartstrings. Bitcoin as a financial lifeline for the world's most vulnerable, think remittances for migrant workers sending money home, or a stable alternative in countries with hyperinflation.
And El Salvador is the big test case here, right?
Exactly. The nation of El Salvador, which adopted Bitcoin as legal tender in 2021, provides an unparalleled real-world case study to test this narrative on a national scale. They explicitly stated objectives like boosting financial inclusion, dramatically lowering remittance costs, and serving as a stable currency for their citizens. Bold goals.
Very bold. So how did it go?
Well, more than a year into this groundbreaking experiment, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, conducted a thorough assessment. And their findings were, frankly, a resounding failure on its own terms.
Failure. How so?
The IMF report explicitly concluded that the adoption of Bitcoin as legal tender has not contributed to promote financial inclusion. Its use for daily transactions was minimal.
People weren't using it.
Hardly at all. And a shockingly low 1.75% of all remittances flowing into El Salvador were transferred via crypto wallets. 1.75%.
Wow, that's tiny, especially when lowering remittance costs was a key goal.
Precisely. The IMF determined that Bitcoin's extreme volatility simply discourages its use for regular customers, making it entirely unsuitable for everyday transactions or for people who cannot afford to lose value in their hard-earned savings.
Yeah, you can't budget if your money's value swings wildly day to day.
Imagine trying to save for your child's education, only to see your funds lose half their value overnight. That's the reality for many. So this failure of the Bitcoin-specific narrative for remittances reveals a deeper, perhaps more cynical truth.
Okay.
What our sources call the remittance paradox. A 2025 working paper from the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS, found that where crypto is used for remittances,
Yeah.
the demand is primarily met by stablecoins, not by native crypto assets like Bitcoin.
Stablecoins.
Yeah,
Like USDT or USDC.
Yep.
Pegged to the dollar.
exactly. What people in unstable economies are truly seeking is not the wild, unpredictable volatility of Bitcoin, but rather the relative stability of the US dollar, which stablecoins provide in a digital format.
So they want the dollar. Just on crypto rails, not Bitcoin itself.
Precisely. This, frankly, exposes the Bitcoin for remittances narrative as a form of bait and switch. The humanitarian narrative, while compelling on the surface and widely propagated by crypto proponents, functions primarily as a sophisticated marketing layer for the speculative casino.
Using a good cause to lure people into speculation.
It appears that way, drawing people in with the promise of utility that isn't actually being delivered by Bitcoin itself, but by something else entirely. It's a crucial distinction that often gets lost in the noise.
Okay, so the populist narratives, payments, remittances, they seem to be falling short or morphing into something else entirely.
Right.
What about institutions? Is that where the third lane might be?
So if the populist narratives for Bitcoin's utility have largely failed to hold up under empirical scrutiny, our sources suggest a more credible third lane might indeed be emerging. However,
Yeah.
it's coming from a very different direction: institutional finance. This lane is explicitly not about a populist revolution or replacing traditional currencies for everyday users.
Okay, so not for the average person.
No. Instead, it's focused on integrating blockchain technology into the existing financial system to solve specific, complex B2B problems. Think of it as a behind-the-scenes evolution, not a public uprising. It's about optimizing the infrastructure, not overthrowing it.
Interesting. What kind of B2B problem?
Yeah. Key pillars of this nascent institutional lane include what's being termed institutional DeFi. Here, major financial institutions like JP Morgan aren't just dabbling, they are actively developing regulated platforms.
Regulated platforms using blockchain.
Yes. These platforms are designed to use blockchain for purposes such as on-chain settlement, streamlining the process of transferring assets and completing transactions, which can drastically cut down on time and costs compared to traditional methods.
Making banks more efficient, basically.
Essentially. They're also exploring digital debt issuance, creating bonds or other debt instruments directly on a blockchain, offering greater transparency and programmability. And, perhaps most significantly, they are focusing on the tokenization of real-world assets, RWAs.
Tokenization, what's that?
This means representing physical assets like real estate, fine art, or commodities as digital tokens on a blockchain. This allows for fractional ownership, greater liquidity, and more efficient trading and management of these assets.
So you could own like a tiny piece of an office building.
That's the idea. Imagine being able to trade a piece of a commercial building as easily as a stock, with clear, immutable ownership records. Big potential there for institutions.
Okay, I see. What else?
Furthermore, there is a growing narrative around Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset. This involves reframing Bitcoin not as a currency, but as a non-sovereign, digitally scarce asset that could be held on a corporate or even national balance sheet.
Like digital gold again, but for companies or countries?
Sort of, yes. Similar to how they hold physical gold or other reserves to diversify. Surveys of institutional investors consistently confirm a strong and growing interest in this lane, with their motivations moving beyond pure speculation.
What are their motivations then?
Portfolio diversification, generating yield through new financial instruments built on blockchain, and simply gaining access to innovative blockchain technology itself. The crucial difference here is in the success metrics.
How are they measuring success?
This emerging institutional lane measures its success not by the daily price of BTC, but by metrics like transaction settlement times, demonstrable reductions in operational costs for complex financial processes, and the efficiency of new financial products enabled by tokenization.
So practical business benefits, not just price going up.
Exactly. This is a fundamentally different kind of utility, and it's largely invisible to most people outside of specialized financial circles. It's quiet, technical, and driven by efficiency, not public enthusiasm.
Okay, let's bring it all together then. After this deep dive, exploring the depths of illicit finance, the vastness of speculation, and these elusive glimpses of real utility, where did we land on that initial two-lane thesis?
Did it hold up?
Did our sources confirm it, or did they reveal something entirely different? The evidence, to put it plainly, is conclusive. The scam lane and the speculation casino are not mere side features of the cryptocurrency landscape.
No, they're dominant.
They are, overwhelmingly, its dominant terrains. They represent the most visible, most capitalized, and most impactful spheres of activity, shaping public perception and driving the vast majority of user engagement in the crypto space.
That seems undeniable from the data.
The scam lane is a deeply entrenched structural component of the ecosystem, constantly evolving its deceptive tactics, while the speculation casino remains the primary, albeit high-risk, function of Bitcoin as an asset for most participants.
Despite the overwhelming dominance of these two lanes, though, the assertion that there is no third lane is, as our sources carefully conclude, an oversimplification.
Okay. So there is a third lane.
A third lane does indeed exist, but, and this is crucial, its true nature bears little to no resemblance to the populist, revolutionary narratives that have been broadly sold to the public for years.
So it's not what the hype suggested.
Not at all. Instead, this actual third lane is a nascent institutional and infrastructure-focused domain. It is fundamentally a B2B world, largely invisible to the retail participant, as we discussed.
Right, the behind-the-scenes stuff.
It focuses on solving complex problems for large entities, serving as a non-sovereign treasury asset, providing new rails for efficient B2B settlement, and creating platforms for the tokenization of real-world assets, fundamentally improving existing financial plumbing.
And how developed is this lane?
It's important to stress its current state. This third lane is currently small, it's experimental, and its long-term economic viability is far from certain. It faces significant regulatory hurdles and technological integration challenges.
So early days, lots of uncertainty.
Definitely. However, it is fundamentally distinct from the other two lanes. Its success is not necessarily correlated with the speculative price of Bitcoin. Its value proposition is in improving existing financial infrastructure and creating new types of digital assets for institutions.
Not serving the average person
Yeah,
directly.
exactly. Rather than serving as a retail payment system or a speculative investment for individual portfolios, it's building a new kind of digital foundation, but largely for the existing financial titans.
So what does this all mean for you, the learner, who just wants to make sense of this incredibly complex space without getting caught up in the hype or the traps?
How do you navigate this?
Our sources provide what they call an honest framing and a clear risk assessment framework. The key to making rational decisions, they argue, is to first correctly identify which lane a given project, narrative, or investment opportunity truly belongs to.
Knowing which road you're actually on.
Exactly. The primary deception that fuels both scams and speculation, and it's a very deliberate one, is the blurring of these lines, pretending that the promise of the nascent institutional third lane somehow justifies participation in the retail-facing casino.
Or worse.
Or even worse, the outright scam lane. They use the B2B promise to sell you a casino ticket.
That's a dangerous conflation.
It is. So let's quickly recap the indicators and risks for each so you have a practical framework. For the scam lane, you need to watch out for
Red flag.
big red flags. Promises of guaranteed or unrealistically high returns. If it sounds too good to be true, it almost certainly is. Be extremely wary of anonymous teams, poorly written white papers that are vague or full of buzzwords, excessive marketing hype with lavish events, and especially celebrity endorsements that seem out of place.
Why is this random celebrity shilling a crypto coin? Good question to ask.
Absolutely. The risk here is near certain loss of your capital to fraud. It's a black hole for your money, designed to separate you from it permanently.
Stay far away. Now, in the speculation lane, the indicators are a bit different. It's an intense, almost obsessive focus on price action discussions are almost exclusively about number go up or predicting the next market pump.
All price talk, little substance.
Pretty much. You'll hear scarcity arguments, like the stock-to-flow model, which attempts to predict price based on supply scarcity, and of course, the ubiquitous HODL mentality as a primary investment thesis.
What's the risk there?
The risk involved in this lane is high-stakes gambling on a volatile, non-productive asset. You're betting entirely on market sentiment and the hope that there will always be a greater fool to buy from you, not on any underlying fundamental value or utility. It's a gamble.
Okay. And finally, for the emerging third lane, the institutional one.
Right. Look for indicators like a clear, stated focus on B2B utility. Is it solving specific, verifiable infrastructure problems like improving settlement times for regulated financial institutions?
Real-world business problem?
Exactly. Does it involve partnerships with established, regulated financial institutions? And critically, are its business models independent of the token's price appreciation? Is the value derived from the service it provides, not just the token's value?
What's the risk in this lane?
The risk in this lane is akin to standard venture capital risk. The project may fail, it might not get adoption, the tech might not work out, but its premise is based on economic utility and solving a real problem within the existing financial system, not just on pure speculation or a deceptive lottery ticket.
So a business risk, not a casino risk or a fraud risk.
A very different kind of risk. So, the takeaway. For the vast majority of individuals, the cryptocurrency market, despite all the elaborate narratives spun around it, truly remains a two-lane highway.
Scam or speculation.
One lane leads to a near-certain loss through sophisticated fraud, preying on greed and technological confusion. The other offers a high-risk gamble in a volatile casino, fueled by shifting stories and emotional trading, where outcomes are highly unpredictable.
And the third lane.
The third lane, the one focused on genuine, tangible utility, is, for now, best understood as a private access road. It's currently under construction by and primarily for large financial institutions designed to serve their specific, complex needs.
Not really open to the public.
Not in the way the casino is. The most dangerous narrative in the entire ecosystem is precisely the one that sells tickets to the retail-facing casino by deceptively pointing to the quiet construction of this private institutional road.
Right, the conflation you mentioned.
It's conflating a lottery ticket with an equity stake in future financial infrastructure that may never directly benefit you, the individual retail participant. Acknowledging this fundamental distinction is the first and most critical step toward navigating this complex and often treacherous landscape with clarity and prudence.
That's a powerful summary. So as you hear about Bitcoin in the news, from friends, or even as you see new crypto projects pop up claiming to be the next big thing, apply this framework. Ask yourself, which lane is this promising?
Is it scam, speculation, or infrastructure?
Is it just selling you a lottery ticket, a dream of getting rich quick? Or is it genuinely building a new kind of infrastructure that might never directly benefit the retail user, but serve a very specific institutional purpose?
A crucial question to ask.
And here's where it gets really interesting for you to explore further. Consider how other emerging technologies far beyond just crypto might also be operating on similar two-lane or three-lane models.
Oh, that's a great point. AI, for example.
Exactly. Think about how public perception and heavily hyped narratives often shape reality very differently from the actual underlying utility, especially in rapidly evolving tech sectors. It's a powerful framework to apply to almost any disruptive technology you encounter. How much is real, how much is hype, and who really benefits.